All right. Hello, everyone. We've reached the top of the hour, so we'll officially give this a start. Thank you so much for coming today. I have a feeling we're going to have people coming in and out of the call as we go on. And as we do, we'll do our best to circle back for introductions. So apologies if we repeat doing that. But thank you so much for coming. And just for some, to share a little bit about the Zoom, if you haven't been on the Zoom before, on the bottom of your screen, there's the mute and unmute and the video to turn on and off. There's also a share screen setting. So if we come to a point where you'd like to share something that's on your computer with everyone, you can do that on the bottom of your screen as well with the green button. Although remember, once you start sharing, you have to physically unshare after you're done. So just as a heads up for a little way around the Zoom conversation. And for those on the phone, remember, they potentially can't see the screen, so we'll talk through some of the visuals that are there as well if we can. Great. So again, thanks for coming. And this open hour is on technology and process in working with environmental justice and environmental health impacted communities. So we have a number of really exciting people on the call already, I know, and I'd love to just go around in a circle for some introductions. And we can start with our name and where we're calling in from. And if you have something that you'd like to intro in on the topic of your background and your interest in it, that would be great. And then we'll go around again and do a second round for people who are interested in talking about the topic, and I think we'll start in relation to stories to share in relation to the topic. So I'm just going to go from my top left down all the way to the bottom in the order that I see everybody for intros. And so as on my first top left, I'm seeing Nick and Vanessa. Are you available?
Ani, Buju, Vanessa Gray, and Dijnakas, Anjanam Gunjaba, Anishnaba Nindao, Makwa and Dodam. Hi, I'm Vanessa. I'm Anishinaabe from the Amjanang First Nation, and I come from the Bear Clan. Hello, everyone.
And we're calling. We're at the University of Toronto right now. I'm Nick Shapiro. I'm an OpenHour fellow at Public Lab. Yeah.
I'm actually next on my screen. I'm Stevie Lewis, and I'm calling out of Miami in Florida. And I'm really excited to hear some of the conversations on this call today. Thank you. Jeff, I see you next.
I'm Jeff Warren. I work with Public Lab on the staff, and I am in Providence, Rhode Island.
Great. And Jackie, are you available?
Yep. My name is Jackie James Creedon. I'm from Tonawanda, New York, and I'm with the community group Citizen Science Community Resources. We've been working, 15 years on environmental justice issues in our community here in Western New York. We have held a corporation that was polluting our community called Tonawanda Coke Corporation accountable for their crimes. And we just recently had the biggest of big wins. We shut down the company a couple weeks ago. So they're no longer in our community. I mean, they are, but there's nothing coming out of their stacks anymore. So we're really happy about that.
Great. Thank you. Liz, are you available to go off mute?
Hi, I'm Liz, calling in from Brooklyn, New York, and I'm part of the Public Lab community, and I'm also on the staff. And I'm really excited to meet everybody here today. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Daniela?
I'm Daniela Soleri. I'm calling from Santa Barbara, California. Hi, Liz. I'm at University of California, Santa Barbara, and I'm actually teaching a class right now on citizen and community science. So hopefully maybe some of the people in the class might tune in, but I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. But we're just interested in learning more about what's going on.
Great. And Bronwyn.
Hi, yeah, I'm calling in from Brooklyn, and I am also one of the public lab community and staff members. I'm going to try to keep my volume off because we're doing construction in the background. But I also just wanted to say, as somebody who grew up a few miles away from where Jackie is now, it's really exciting to sort of see some stuff changing, because that infrastructure is something that sort of super normal when I grew up with it. It's really, really impressive. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Bronwyn. Kimberly, I see you on the phone. Are you available to go off mute?
Hello?
Okay, I've unmuted you, so
Oh,
hear you now.
okay.
If you want to go on mute, you can do it through your phone now.
Okay, perfect. You can hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I'm here representing the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic in New Orleans, and I'm pretty new to the clinic, so I'm here today to learn and hopefully network and learn more about OpenHour as well.
Great, thanks for joining. Dan, are you available to go off mute?
Yes, I'm Dan Beavers, and I'm in Picayune, Mississippi, and just hanging out to see what I can learn.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I believe the 215 number, Barbara, is that you?
That's
251,
me.
sorry.
I'm Barbara Weckheser, Pascagoula, Mississippi, and we've been fighting for the last 5 to 6 years with the industries that are coming off their fence line into ours. And I just need some help with some environmental justice, and was hoping that I could learn some knowledge through this to help our small little subdivision so that we can get out before more of us pass away.
All right, thanks for joining, Barbara. And I have another person on the phone. I'm going to unmute you from a 443 number. Are you available to do an intro?
Yes, Ruth White. I'm from the Maryland Sierra Club Beyond Gas team. I think someone forwarded me the information about this call.
Great, and tell me your name again.
Ruth White.
Hi, Ruth. Thanks for joining today. All right, that's everyone that I see so far. And again, we might get a couple who join in here as we go, and we'll make sure that we all have a chance to say hello. I was wondering if we could hear from a couple people who are specifically joining the call today about some of the stories in relation to this topic, the technology and process in working with environmental justice and environmental health impacted communities. I think, stories are a good starting point for our background in relationship to this topic, and it would be great to move into some questions and open conversation as well after. Just quick as well, I'm going to pass on an apology from Shannon Dose-Megan, who was hoping to be on the call today and was listed as attending, and she's not able to join at this time, but she's sending along, and she will follow on after with the recording. Just quick before we go, I did get another phone call coming in from a 510 number. If you're available, I've unmuted you to introduce your name and where you're calling in from.
1 second.
I have a guest. This is Brian Butler of California and Texas.
Okay, great. And feel free to come and go from mute. You are currently unmuted on this side. And
awesome. If I may, I was just in a room with a lot of noise, and I just wanted to get out of there before I began speaking. but thank you, Liz, for the invitation. Big fan of Public Lab for many, many years now. I've worked in inequality for quite some time, specifically around community organizing, research, advocacy, etc., policy. Just about half a year ago, I took a position with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. I'm working within the Technology Implementation Office. So it's just been such an incredible intersection, and I'm really pleased and honored to be here on the call with you all.
Great, thanks for joining on. And another person who just came in, I'm going to unmute you. Beth, are you available to say hello and where you're calling in from?
Yeah, I'm Beth Weinberger, and I'm with the Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project. And I'm calling from New Haven, Connecticut, although we're based in Southwest Pennsylvania.
Great, thanks for joining on. All right, if it's available, I would like to start with some of the quick storytelling for background on the topic. And I'm just gonna go down a little bit in order of the people who we've listed who are attending the open hour. And Vanessa, you're on top. Are you available to go first for a little background and your relationship to the topic of the open hour today?
Sure. Maybe I'll just ask to time me for 10 minutes and let me know when I'm running out. Slideshow I'm going to share, so I'll try to be descriptive for those who can't see. I introduced myself in my traditional language of Anishinaabe Moin. I'm an Anishinaabe Kwe from the Aamjiwnaang First Nation, and my area is a little bit more well known as Chemical Valley than it is, Anishinaabe territory. It is in southwestern Ontario, and the city we're closest to is called Sarnia, Ontario, and it's the first place in Canada where they struck oil and then also started refining the oil, and where Sarnia really started branching out was a pipeline, like pipelines between Fort McMurray and Sarnia. So there's always been like a strong relationship there through the oil industry. A big concern that's focused and specific to the area is the Great Lakes. My community is located along the St. Clair River at the mouth of Lake Huron, and the companies also use the waterways as their own means of shipping product in and out of the refineries and such. So this is a picture of a good friend of mine. She's a fellow young activist in her traditional regalia. She's standing at a sunset, just in our community, with the refineries in the background. And that's the thing about the community, is that you don't have to go very far to be standing on the fence line of a major industry. And so most of my talks, I do a lot of public speaking on this issue, is focused on environmental racism. Because as we all know, Indigenous people were first to be displaced from our communities, our homes, and kind of pushed onto smaller pieces of land called reserves. And of course, environmental racism is a broader term now. It's not only applicable to Indigenous people, it's applicable to Black communities, to communities of low income. It's a much broader issue, but like I think my focus is like our traditional ways of life being impacted by these refineries and companies that like a lot of our communities have in common. And I think that's like what I want to focus on this talk about, or this time I have with all of you folks, is the fact that these aren't uncommon issues, and there should be more ways for us as, you know, like community members living on the front lines who aren't, you know, in university educated, just average people, and how we can better connect ourselves to other average people on the front lines, because there's nobody to tell that truth. And like, maybe there are people to tell the truth, but like there's a lot that industry gets away with because in Canada, we have something called the Ministry of the Environment. And so that would be like the level of government that's supposed to be like the in-between the community members and the industry. And they have something called like a spills action center, like where I come from. And so when there's like a spill or release, we're supposed to call them and let them know, but like their spills action center, or like if we want to talk to somebody, is like a 9 to 5 thing, where like these industries like function obviously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time. And so it's just not a system that's meant to actually be helpful to us. There's no preventative work to like to make us feel safe in our own homes. And so the slide I have up now, like I'm not speaking specifically to the slides, I'm sorry, but I'll mention that these are, it's just a slide like listing some of the companies that share a fence line with my community. And the pictures I'm all sharing are basically refineries within like a short distance between our homes and these like some of these multinational companies. And some of these companies include Imperial Oil, Esso, Lanxess, Shell, Cabot, Praxair, Enbridge, Suncor, Dow Chemical still has like facilities there, Styrolution, and these are all big like places. Like they're not by any means like small facilities. These are all huge. And this is where industry gets away with these types of things, is having these regulations where it's a facility by facility basis, which kind of makes sense, but except for places like my community, where like you can look at a refinery on its own and its emissions and stuff, but it doesn't quite capture how much impact it has if the refinery sitting next to like 4 other refineries around it. Like it's a lot, and it accumulates a lot. And what I've learned working in a lab with Nick and my like supervisors here, Michelle Murphy, is our look into like how they're regulated is not an exact like number necessarily about like what their emissions are. It's kind of like they measure by like I don't know how you'd say that. It's like an approximate or a guesstimation of like how much they're actually emitting. So it could be it might obviously be a lot more than what they're like admitting that they are, and they can get away with that. And they often can write or ask for like permission to pollute, like sort of like slips where like they're saying that like this, like we can't meet this like requirements of like cutting our emissions down to a certain level, so we need like a permission to pollute type of like situation. And like these companies do it, and so the government gives them permission to exceed the amounts that they're supposed to. And so, like, what does the regulation even mean in the system that they don't even have to follow? And so my work is very, like, feels kind of spread out. In this next slide, it's a bunch, sorry?
As you click, can you click through the slides? For some reason, we're not seeing the slide change.
Oh, like you don't, what do you see right now?
Just the first slide right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe go to the, oh, I'm seeing your mouse now. So actually just click on the slide that you want and we'll see it show up.
Okay, the slides are moving on our screen.
I'm not moving them as much. Like, is it the environmental racism one that you're looking at?
No, it's the first slide. So I think you might have a different screen share going on. So if you click the bottom of the Zoom again, or if you cancel out, you can select the window that we see. And you might need to select another
Okay,
one.
I think
they're
looking at this one. Yeah, it's changing now?
Now it's changing, yes.
Okay. So I'll just go quickly through those slides. This is the slide that she enumerated. And then.
Thank you, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So my work feels like very spread out and a little scattered because we're looking at the very, like, fundamental roots of Canada being, like, a resource, like, hungry, like terrible, like, robbery of our traditional use of the land. And as well as how the government worked their way into taking the land, taking away, like, our culture within, like, the Indian Act, and how companies can get away with polluting, and how the government kind of makes it, like, a normalized thing, or makes it okay for them to continue to do so around my community. And so some of the focus is on like, Indigenous youth, and how we're expected to thrive in such an environment when we can't even, when the air itself is dangerous to us. So some of the things, obviously, if you're living around so much heavy pollution, there's respiratory issues. The World Health Organization has named Sarnia to have, like, the worst air. And there's been, like, a skewed sex ratio. This is 40% of Canada's petrochemical industry. 39% of the women have had at least one miscarriage or stillbirth. There's only about, like, 800 of us living on the reserve, so those numbers are extreme. It's a very small community. We're very much, like, outnumbered by all of these refineries. And like I said, like, what I want to focus on in this call is the fact that this is not an uncommon issue. I mean, like, the whole chemical valley being such a huge entity in our lives is kind of unique, but these companies are also located in other communities. These pipelines go to other communities, and we should, like, there should be ways of networking and communicating with each other so we can strengthen our messages as frontline communities. Some of these, there's, like, so much to go into with, like, all my slides. They're just really to, like, to just get, like, idea of, like, what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'll end it there. I think that was, like, my 10 minutes.
Great, thank you so much. I really appreciate your images, and I'm sorry we had a problem there in the beginning, being able to see, but they were really powerful.
My fault. Yeah.
No, nobody's fault. Zoom. We blame Zoom. Thank you. And Jackie, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of background on your community as well, and what you've been going through with Tonawanda, and maybe a little bit of this success story that you recently have.
Okay, well, it's a long story. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but so in our community of Tonawanda, New York, we're north of Buffalo, and we have 53 air-regulated facilities in our community as well. It's the most concentrated air-permitted industry in all of New York State. So yeah, when we were looking at our air issues, obviously there were a lot of possibilities. We didn't know. We thought that the air was making us sick, and we didn't know where it was coming from. We thought it was a combination of all the facilities, which I'm sure it is. And then about 10 years ago, we had help from Lois Gibbs' group, CHEJ. And they came into town and helped us get organized. And they said, well, you know, you're only a very, very small group of people. So you're going to have to target, you know, let's target one industry. And so at that time, we decided to target the worst one that we felt was in our community, which is called Tonawanda Coke Corporation. And Tonawanda Coke makes something called Foundry Coke, which has nothing to do with Coca-Cola. It is a product that they used. Actually, the beginning product is coal, so it's a product of coal, and they use it for an energy source in making steel. So it's a really nasty process. And this company, well, we started everything with the Bucket Brigade. In 2004, we took an air sample with the homemade air device using a Home Depot bucket, and we found high levels of benzene. So that was actually previous to us deciding to target Tonawanda Coke Corporation. But it's been a really long journey. We've had lots of ups and downs and wins along the way, and I thought that our story was over with a couple years ago because they were held liable in federal court. So this company, what I understand from the story when I tell it is that the most interesting part of the story is that this company was such a bad actor. When we felt that the benzene was coming from this corporation, we pretty much knew it was because we used our results and worked with the New York State DEC, and they placed 4 high-tech air monitors to measure our air from 2007 to 2008. So that data was the smoking gun that we needed to pinpoint where all this benzene was coming from, because again, we had all these possibilities. So when we had that information, we started our campaign. We reached out to the owner of Tonawanda Coke and said, let's just meet with the community. We just want you to clean up your act, like not a big deal, right? So the owner kept on, wouldn't meet with us. Then when we had this data, that's when the tables really turned as well. All the elected officials jumped on board with us. We had our senators, Senator Schumer and Gillibrand, write letters to the owner of the company saying, you must meet with the community. And the owner would not meet with the community. So that's when we really ramped up the pressure in the end of 2009. We rallied outside the gates of Tonawanda Coke. And at the end of 2009, the company was raided, and the environmental manager was taken out in handcuffs. So not only do we have the data, but then we had the federal government. We had the Department of Justice on their butt. So that all culminated in March of 2013 when this company fought even the federal government. Most times these companies, when the federal government comes after, you settle. You do not go to court because you're going to probably lose. But no, the owner kept on fighting, and it went to trial, and it went to a jury, and the jury, guess what happened? They were found guilty of 14 of the 17 counts, and the environmental manager was found guilty 15 of the 17. The extra one, which he was found guilty for, was obstruction of justice. There was a pressure release valve which was unregulated, and he tried to conceal it and hide it. And we estimated there were thousands and thousands of tons of benzene and coke carcinogenic air coming out of that were unregulated and were going into our community and making us sick. I mean, the Department of Health has come in our community and has told us statistically that there's certain cancers that are very high that are related to coke oven emissions. So in March of 2014, they were sentenced, and the environmental manager did jail time, and they were fined thousands and thousands of dollars, and $42 million in total. They were ordered to fund a couple of community projects, our soil study being one of them. And so our benzene in our community was reduced by 92%. So I thought that was the end of the story and it was all over and done with. Well, what I realized is that this was like a sleeping dog, just ready to come back again, because in early this year, they had something called a tunnel collapse, and they started polluting our community again. And what we did this time is we had folks take photos, and we started this whole social media campaign with posting photos of this black sooty smoke coming out of this company and how it was making people sick. So they were just posting photos with dates and times and you know how they felt. And those photos were, the government took notice of our photos, and they used our photos and hauled them back into court. This just happened like 2 months ago. And they were found guilty of breaking their probation. But the sentencing was, the only thing that the judge ordered them to do is install additional monitors to monitor to see what was in that black sooty smoke. I mean, we all knew that it was making us sick. So there was another prong approach. The New York State DEC was coming after them as well and ordered the company a cease and desist. So they were, this is a Title V company, and the New York State DEC was on a mission to revoke their air permit. So that happened just last month. We showed up in court, in DEC court, and we were there 5 minutes, and the lawyers got up and said they're in negotiating phase. So at that point, we were cautiously optimistic, and by the end of the week, that was I think a Monday, by Friday, I got a phone call from the prosecuting attorney for the Department of Justice. And by the way, I was hearing stuff on the ground that they were shutting down, that there were something called nitrogen tanks coming in to pump in nitrogen to shut down the coke ovens. So we were all hearing, you know, these rumors, and we didn't know if these rumors were true or not. So there was a Channel 4 news reporter that showed up in court. He got a tip on Wednesday that they may be closing down. They were negotiating, and they were going to try to close down without letting anybody know about it, right? Well, this Channel 4 news reporter got a tip, and he showed up in court, and it was just him and the two lawyers. And the lawyer for Tonawanda Coke tried to have him thrown out, and the judge said, no, this can be open. And pretty much he broke the story that they were closing. So we knew that, and they just literally closed like a couple weeks ago. Like, they're done. They've been in operation for 100 years. 100 years. And yeah, I still don't believe it. It's still sinking in.
Thank you, Jackie. Wow, what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing some of that. I'd like, Barbara, are you still on the line?
I am still on the line, and I'm finding these stories so interesting and so much of what we're dealing with at the same time.
Yeah, I was wondering if you
I
could
live,
a little bit to your community, yeah, and your story.
okay, I live within a half a mile of 5 Title V industries, Chevron being one of the biggest. And they've chosen for years, we had Mississippi Phosphate, we got finally closed down, which was putting all the sulfuric acid out into the air. Now we have Chevron with all of their ordeal. We have BT Halter, who is a shipbuilding industry with all of their sandblast and their chemicals. We have cancer death rates that are unreal. When you look at 11 houses and you have 5 people that have died with cancer in the last 2 years, that should tell you something. We've now gone and we have an environmental attorney who actually is trying to help us. We've dealt with the state EPA, which seems to take industry side over citizen side. We have worked with the city, the county, and the state, which seems to take industry over citizen side. And we're at a turning point where we don't know where else to go. We're not a quote unquote wealthy community. We don't have the funds to really fight for the environmental justice that we need. The attorney and a group of other attorneys are working as best they can. We're now doing health surveys for the second time to prove the Department of Health says unless it is like a virus or a bug, they won't help us. So where do you go? My husband is in the hospital, and I sat in the hospital and caught Chevron again with a flare that lasted 6.5 hours this week. And again, turned it in. I got a complaint number, but what will they do? Well, we will go check it out. And it's like the lady said, you call them, and of course, by the time they get there, either the smell's gone, there's no odor that they can smell, or the flare is out. So therefore, there's nothing we can see. So I joined the call to listen to others so I could pick up some information of where else to take this group to find help. I'm seeking help. And that's the end of my story.
Well, thanks for getting on the call, Barbara. And I did share your the blog post up on the OpenHour page, and people, if you're interested, can go read about some of the tools and technologies that your community has tried to use in the past in relation to your questions and concerns and problems you've had.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to, we have so many amazing people on the line, from Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, from the Sierra Club, Bay Area Air Quality Management, Tulane Environmental Law. I would love to open the floor to have a conversation on this topic with everyone, and I'll do my best to facilitate and moderate, but at this point I'd just love to open the floor.
Great.
I have a
Daniela, you want to go, and then
Yeah.
I think Kimberly, you spoke next, so Daniela first.
Yes, sure.
It's just a Is that all right, Kimberly?
Oh, go ahead.
It's just a comment. I think it was something that Vanessa said initially, and then I think it might is perhaps relevant in Barbara's situation as well, that I have read recently by a political philosopher talking about how as we're becoming more and more inequitable, that fines, the difference between a fine and a fee is becoming blurred, and that now the fines that polluting industries experience are just being considered part of the cost of doing business, and they don't represent any disincentive for these companies. They just are an expected expense that people have to pay. And so, really, even though we hear about, there being fines associated with contaminating a community's water or air or causing illness, they're not a disincentive at all. They're not a punishment. They're just a cost of doing business. And I wonder if that's what people have experienced. It seems to me that's what I was hearing, but I was curious about that.
Can someone speak to that? And Kimberly?
Yeah, that's true. That's 100% correct. Exactly. Yeah, it's not a disincentive. It's, so it's not a way, not a tool to use to, try to target a company.
Brian, I was wondering if you have any perspective to add on that one.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to disconnect and reconnect. But no, I think I've lost the feed to my camera, but no, the conversation is right on point. Daniela, what you were saying is my experience, and is why when we talk about institutional changes and policy changes, we get that long-standing shift versus these one-offs, or this one particular facility. And while those frontline grassroots victories are so important, we have to continue to change the framework. And I know right now in the time and space that we're in with our current administration in DC, it's even more dire. But of course, we all stay encouraged with people starting to dig their heels in a little further because of that. But no, I think I've continued to see, specifically to this point that we're discussing, I really see policy as being a really important piece of that puzzle.
Thank you. Kimberly, are you available?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to just kind of follow up on Barbara's comment. So Barbara, I'm here as the Community Outreach Director for Tulane Environmental Law Clinic. And I know you mentioned, you've consulted with environmental attorneys. And so I kind of just want to put us out there as a resource. So we, under Louisiana state law, we can't solicit clients. Like, we can't come to you.
Right.
But we do occasionally work with folks most of our work is in Louisiana. We do occasionally work with folks in Mississippi and Arkansas. So I'm happy to give you my contact information, just if nothing else, to have us as a resource. And if there was, a specific issue that you wanted to bring to us, you should just know that we're here and that, we can be a resource to you potentially.
That is wonderful.
Most of our work focuses, or I should say all of our work focuses on specific actions, right? So we don't pursue cases for monetary damages. We pursue cases for things like, air permits or water permits.
That's exactly what we need.
Right.
We need someone that will check Chevron's permit. And it's huge.
So maybe I can follow up with you and get you my information after this call, and I can tell you more about, what the clinic does and doesn't do. And of course, there's no shortage of work along the Gulf Coast for us.
Absolutely.
So, we're not able to help with everything, but you should definitely be aware that we, are here as a resource. for
sounds
the
so
Chevron
wonderful.
issue, but also just going forward in the future as well.
Right. Well, that sounds wonderful. And if you could follow up so I could get your information, that would be fabulous.
Definitely. What's the best way for us to share information after this call? Is there, I don't know if...
I have...
Stevie can put you guys in touch.
Yeah,
okay.
Email me, Kimberly, Stevie at publiclab.org. I'm happy to connect you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Because Stevie has my information, so she could give it to you, and then you could contact me.
Perfect.
We'll do it that way.
Vanessa and Jackie, I was wondering if either of you have any experience working with law clinics or others who've helped you in these fights.
Right. There was an attorney, her name is Carrie Powell from Earth Justice. She helped us. Well, she's not with Earth Justice anymore. I think, I'm not sure where she is right now. I know she was in EPA down in Atlanta for a while. But yeah, she helped us. So there are people, I just wanted to tell you that there are people out there. It can seem really infuriating, and so many people just throw in the towel because this work is not easy. It's long and it's arduous. And we started this, I mean, we took that bucket air sample in 2004, and now it's 2018. I mean, like 14 years later, you know, I can't believe I stuck with it, to be quite honest, but if you stick with it, it can happen, you know, it can. And I understand what you're talking about. It's frustrating. And believe me, I stopped a number of times because I needed to. I suffer from health issues of my own. And for some reason, I mean, I just kept on coming back to it. I did number of times say, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do it anymore because it's exhausting and it's infuriating. So I get it. And just when you think that no one is around to help, there will be people around that will come out. And it's finding those. Don't spend your time and frustrations on those people that really should be helping that don't help, you know?
Right.
So it's finding those people that will help, that will be your champions.
Right. We've done the bucket brigade. We've done the little monitor that, you know, the particulate matter monitor. We've done that. We had an industry put up a monitor that got all the hits, and then, of course, it went belly up and that lost that monitor. We've done our own sampling. I mean, and I have a book that's about 15 inches tall of just data of what we've already gathered. So, you know, we've continued to do it. And as you lose one of the members to cancer and to that type of thing, then it kind of, you have to stop and say, and kind of readjust and say, where is the next step? Who's going to be the next person? And it's getting to a point now where we live now that it's getting actually fearful on a level to have to live here. But I know we're not the only place in the United States that has this. But then in turn, the industries can pollute all they want to. They give them a regulation, but it's like they said about the fines and the fees. They don't care if they get a fine or a fee, whatever they get, they pay it off. And guess what? When the city is broke, they go to the industry and they bail them out. So we're fighting in between here, is the way I see it. And it's like the citizens doesn't matter anymore. Pascagoula's lost over half of their residents. Why? They've either moved away, passed away. I mean, over half the population, it's half of what it used to be.
Can I chime back in for a moment?
Go for it, Brian.
Yeah, no, as I mentioned, I just recently joined the local air district, regional air district about 4 or 5 months ago. But before then, for the last 2 years, I was working primarily out in the Bayview, Hunters Point community in San Francisco. Most people don't know about it just because it would be San Francisco's ugly little secret getting out. But it's the remnants of the World War II shipyard and radiological defense laboratory work that they were doing here in Northern California. Matter of fact, the bomb that they dropped on Japan left from this particular port, incredibly contaminated, long legacy of disease and disregard, and to the point that I'm hearing, really just a complete denial of the truth, and it's incredibly frustrating. And in this talk, I was thinking I didn't really want to do too much remedial community organizing, just because I really get the sense that everyone is up to speed when it comes to that. But sometimes it's still good to kind of just remind us all, each other, what things are important, and just to check those lists. When I think about this work, I'll oftentimes think about policy in the broadest sense. That's policy, the written word, that's politicians, that's just that political landscape that you have to always be engaged on wherever you stand with the issue, wherever you are in the process of the issue, just at least know what the temperature is. And then also, just that door knocking, community on the ground, organizing. And also one thing that I'm always curious to hear from individuals with your issue is, where is the media? Have you started to cultivate relationships with the local newspaper and even potentially national news? Right now, environmental issues like these are du jour. They're in vogue, and we have to leverage those. As sad as it is that, the interest is now because of some overly politicized campaigning, but yeah, we have to use the media. And then as we had mentioned, legal recourse. For the work that I was doing out in Bayview, we made incredible headway working closely with the Golden Gate Law School Environmental Law and Justice Clinic. And they were huge. It's just amazing how people, even elected officials, city and county and state entities, the businesses themselves, how they react, how they correspond with you, so incredibly different when you have that legal representation. And I know it's not easy, just by way of the cost and the caseload that a lot of these instances have. But of course, there's the big names like the NRDC, Sierra Club. We were lucky with a local university here that was committed to this effort, and they have been for many, many decades. And so that was an advantage that we had just locally. But I want to just echo what Jackie was saying, and just in terms of remaining encouraged in the midst of it all, because it's one thing I thought you might mention, Jackie, is the work is hard, and it's not a short-term thing. And as much as we think the obvious and what's right should be short-term, but it's just not. There's so much money involved in, and it's true. So much of what we see businesses doing in light of these issues that we're articulating is just, putting the fines a part of the budget sheet. It's just the cost of doing business. And more than that, even, communities organizing and raising hell, they couch that in the public relations and trying to find ways that they can pay communities off, whether they sponsor the Earth Day thing. I live in Richmond, Texas. I live in Richmond, California. It's funny. I actually moved from Texas to California, and I lived in Richmond, Texas, and I moved to Richmond, California. But I'm currently living in Richmond. I'm currently living in Richmond, California, and Chevron. It really makes me sick to my stomach when I watch how Chevron in the last 2 years, just seeing it up close, and having worked in this field for so long, seeing it what it looks like. They're so sophisticated and so thoroughly ingrained in the community as a good neighbor, while they actively are doing the opposite. And so these are a lot of those dynamics that we're up against. And I think the staying encouraged, self-care, these are kind of those basic things that we need to do. But being creative, I think, youth, I haven't heard anything about the youth. It sounds like you said half of the community has moved out and half of the community has passed on. I'm almost confident, largely because of all the illness that this industry is perpetuating on the community. But if there is any youth, this is such an opportunity for them to take ownership of their community, to fight for their elders, fight for their own future and their potential children's future, and just really, in the last 2 years I was here in the Bay Area, I can't tell you what we didn't do. There was few things that we did. We did direct action, we did protests, we did, social media campaigns. We partnered with other organizations that weren't even specifically germane to our issue. We can get our message, get that synergy going, and then there's also those natural opportunities that pop up, like a mayor election, when these candidates all of a sudden are listening and claiming to be wanting to do something. It's such a good opportunity to prime all the candidates so that they are on record saying that they're going to do X, Y, and Z about this issue. I'm going to shut up because I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, well, I'd like to speak to that a little bit. I think it's important for folks to understand that even though organizing is one avenue to take for a campaign, and we did use the organizing, but what was really crucial was the science, was the citizen science, and we used citizen science a couple times to shine a spotlight on the problem, with the idea that we knew we needed a comprehensive study to, and you spoke to truth. And what is science? What is the science? Science is truth, right? So, so that was really, like I said, that the air monitoring, the air monitors, and that comprehensive air study that was done in our community was the smoking gun. And that's science that we needed. And I'm not saying we didn't use the media, we weren't political, we didn't use organizing. Yeah, we used all of those, but it was the science that really was what turned the tables. That turned the tables, and that brought everybody then on our side. And it was infuriating in the beginning because everybody thought we were a bunch of Looney Tunes, that we were, yeah, I mean, like tree huggers, and like,
right.
If somebody said I was going to turn into an environmentalist like 20 years ago, I'd say, are you crazy? So, I don't know.
Jackie, no, if I can just chime in on that point, thank you so much. I completely ignored a really big part of my personal work and a really big piece of what we're all here to talk about, and that science and technology. I have a lot to say about it. I think one thing that I'd love to kind of tee up for the conversation is, how you sometimes balance that science technology piece in light of communities who are sick, and because I've been working in the environmental justice field for some time, and there is a bit of I don't want to say a rift, but you have some zealot, diehard EJ activists who don't believe in science, or I shouldn't say that, who are just sick of this citizen science thing and saying that we know we're sick. The government knows we're sick. They have all the data in the world to do what they should do. Why are we talking about science? That's one thing that I'd like to talk about at some point, because I think it's worth acknowledging. I'm on the train of thought that I'm very much in belief of science and the power of science. And I think, we are oftentimes attacked with our science, no matter how reliable and valid and robust it is, we still get attacked on it. But the science is key. And Jackie, one of the things that I was so blessed here in San Francisco, I had colleagues at the University of San Francisco State, San Francisco State University, UC Berkeley. We had long-standing Black academics in this Black community who had done work on the NASA space station, who were still willing to go to bat with us and stand before, to put their names on these documents we were putting forth to help us with this research. And it's very, very important. We worked with the Air District before I joined the Air District in securing about $100,000 to do a community mapping, to roll out some hotspot mapping. And again, a lot of this is just trying to legitimize and justify what people already know. I tell you, there's few things better than the instrument of the human body, the scientific instrument of the human body. Usually that's a really refined canary in the coal mine, if you will. You know, that, is there a question? I'm going to shut up. Nick, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, actually I had a question about this. Public Lab has had some interest in EPA Method 9. I'm getting all of a sudden really technical, so I apologize for everyone on the call. But there's a strike, I guess, just to couch it a little bit, because we have 1 minute left. To couch it a little bit.
We'll leave the line open, but before
Okay.
everyone jumps, thanks for joining, and you know, you come and go at this point. So
Okay.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I think so. Just to give a little context with Public Lab, like a lot of times Public Lab's asked, and I don't want to speak for all of Public Lab, of course, Public Lab's asked to develop technologies to address under or researched aspects of environmental pollution. And there's this tricky aspect then of you develop a novel technology and you bring it to a community, and maybe it's not quite ready for it to be used in the community with the highest stakes. So I think that's sort of maybe an issue maybe for another call. But because of that problem of sort of bringing sometimes unstable new technology to the people that need the most robust data, that are also most spread thin, I've been thinking about it, and the Public Lab has been posting about it as well, in terms of the potential use of EPA Method 9, which is this visual opacity regulatory mechanism where you can get your vision registered, just explaining it to everyone, since I'm sure some of you are very familiar. You can get your vision registered every 6 months as being able to detect 5% differences in the opacity of a plume, which correlates to the amounts of particulate matter, et cetera, in the plume. And so this seems like a potential wonderful way where you don't have to have data that can be contested, and people are saying the community members aren't legitimate enough, or they're fudging the data, or they don't have their super expensive device, but it has regulatory traction. And so I was wondering about other people's experience with EPA Method 9.
Well, that's exactly what happened with us, Nick. In this last go around with Tonawanda Coke is they were violating their probation they were in violation of their opacity measurements, right? So that's when we started taking the photographs, and the Department of Justice used our photographs in their briefs as evidence. So just photographs and with dates and times were good, and that was
Jackie,
for people to do.
Yeah. Nick and Jackie, I mean, because this is now we're really getting into the part of the conversation. My ideas really start to cook, because we're talking about some of the nuance of what we're talking about, whether, is it just, hey, let's let the community, the Black and brown community people, play in the sand with these devices and make them feel good about themselves. One of the things that I've actually loved about Public Lab is that they've devoted themselves to low tech, deliberately keeping it accessible, because that's a really big part of this whole thing. But no, I think, Jackie, do you think, though, in your instance, there was a priming or there was a ripeness for it, that you literally had the regulators wanting to do something, and they just needed that community legitimizing the community voice and say, oh no, we really want to do. For example, in Houston, Texas, there was this Pasadena refining. There's this refinery that's old. It continually breaks the rules. Like regulators are kind of already chomping at the bit for that one. And
right. It's really important. Right. Yes. That's a very good point. Mm-hmm.
Would you think that was kind of at play for you guys, that,
Oh yeah, this last go around. Yeah. I mean, we've had many go arounds with the company, but the hardest one was the air one. But as time went on, the regulators wanted to get rid of this company too. And this last go around, even though we had to do work as a community and, and I had to do very little, just take photos and post them on social media. They were, as I said, the wagons were already circling around them at this point. Like everybody wanted them closed. All the elected officials were making public comments, wanted the company closed. So very good point.
Yeah. No, I wanted to just point that out, because again, we've got to attack these issues from all fronts. From literally, if it's 300,
Exactly.
if it's a sphere,
Exactly.
if it's
And
a
the whole
sphere,
idea is not to give up, you know, but it's exhausting. So.
Yeah.
One thing that's...
But, I'm sorry. Stevie?
No, it's okay. I've been chasing the Method 9 thing a little bit lately. And the other thing is there's a Method 22, which is a little bit easier for people because you don't have to be certified to do it. But I was on the phone recently with somebody from the EPA who works on the method 9 and 22 in visual monitoring and reporting. And one of the things they were talking about was that the states actually have to implement their own regulations on it. So some states will follow this and others won't. And you oftentimes, like in Wisconsin where I've been looking at it, you have to dig through the permits to find what the levels are that each facility is permitted to release at. So it's not as federally regulated. It's just there's an approachable method that people can do around it. That was a recent kind of disappointment. Like you're like, oh, there's a method, it's easy to do, it's federally enforceable. That was the thought I had. But it sounds like the enforcement side of it is pretty distributed.
Yeah, and I think, at least in California, and I'm trying to chime in here with relevant points as much as possible, but at least here in California, the last couple of years, people really weren't focused on the federal government. And I know we're not talking about EPA proper. We're talking about, a method that they basically have given their blessing to. I just to kind of piggyback that thought, I think, in California, it's a different ballgame altogether, just the political landscape. But sometimes it's that state regulatory entity, because right now the federal government, sometimes bringing them in is more trouble than it's worth. You might sabotage yourself. And again, I can only speak from my experience here in California and Texas. But I wonder right now where we are with the federal government if local regulators are better targets. I would love to hear any thoughts you all might have on that.
Yeah, well, I can speak to that. Am I monopolizing? So I understand. We were considering maybe going national to put another prong approach on this company before they closed. But we were concerned about, the Trump administration and getting word of this. So we decided we wanted to stay, in New York State, where we know, it's democratic and we were safe. So that's obviously something to consider too. We're lucky that we're in New York State, because if we were down south, this probably wouldn't have happened. We just, we're lucky that our state administration is very, pro-environment. So.
Yeah. And I really like what we've been discussing in terms of just incorporating the science, whether it's the opacity methodology or just certification that people can get to. And it's just the whole suite of different approaches and techniques that we can use to really create that foundation for our asks and our demands. It's all based in empirical data that can't be misconstrued. And I think health data is also a good supplement to just the data that we're all kind of referring to in terms of seeing the plumes, the flaring, also maybe doing some type of sampling, bucket brigade, mini vols, all the different types of instrumentation that we were able to capture particulate matter levels. But definitely, couching that with the health data I think is a very compelling argument. And, getting those elected, it's creating that groundswell. And I think largely I wanted to talk to, I think Kimberly was the woman who was really reaching out for just some ideas with her situation. And so I did want to just continue to kind of offer any thoughts that came to me.
I think that was Barbara, right?
Yeah. Barbara and Pascagoula, but Kimberly as well, though, as somebody who works with the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, you're, in the southern U.S., in, certainly a state that has challenges around this. And I don't mean to keep anybody on the line. We're past the hour, but what have you found that's been useful in your work around community collected data and advocacy on some of these things?
Well, let me start with the caveat that I've only been in this position a couple weeks, so I'm still very much learning the ropes. But we definitely work closely with Louisiana Bucket Brigade, and I know that the data collected by citizens has been really important for us in cases. But generally, we always push for evidence in whatever form we can get it. So, things like pictures. It's, a lot of times the issues that we deal with are like noise and odor, and those sorts of things can be harder to kind of capture. But I would say, it seems to me like the biggest single thing has been working with the Bucket Brigade for us.
Liz?
Yeah, I was wondering if I would love to return us to the question of, like, from our different positions in organizations like law clinics or nonprofits, or from affected communities themselves, we find each other like working in a lot of different kind of collaborations. Some may be partnerships, some may be some kind of technology support relationship. There's many different forms of partnerships, and I wondered if anyone has anything to reflect on regarding the way that groups have interacted in pursuit of commonly held goals, while at the same time being different.
Right, partnerships are very important. I learned we had a very successful partnership, and most recently we've had one that is not. So I think the most, our partnership initially was with mainly the New York State DEC to get the comprehensive air project that we got. And we were all, as the engineer said, we were all pulling in the same direction. And Liz, you're right, right from the beginning, you have to determine, what are the goals? Are those shared goals, right? And what does the partnership look like? Then most recently, we have a partnership with the local university, and that did not go well because we were pulling in opposite directions. So we're still sort of in the middle of that right now. And what I learned about, and this is through Jennifer Shirk from Citizen Science Association, she told me about the Blueprint Union of Concerned Scientists, which is called Scientist Community Partnerships. I highly recommend that. We use that as our guiding document as an organization now.
Jackie, while I was in Texas, partnerships got a little precarious at times, but it was funny to me when I'd be doing some environmental justice panel at Rice University in the Shell Center for Sustainability. I always thought that was really odd, and so it gets really funny depending on where you are, kind of this partnership piece, and for the really far left EJ groups, people are really careful about who they work with and the politics of that partner and who they take money from. And so these, are really important pieces to this all. I think paramount to everything is trying to paramount to that, of course, is trying to change things for the better. no, I tell you guys, I think the first thing I want to say about partnerships is you got to keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. You really want to keep an open mind when it comes to partnership. I think there's the obvious ones like, you know, the like organizations, whether that's the national or the regional or the local environmental groups, depending on where they have their skin in the game. But for us, it was really fun to partner with local groups in the actual community that may not have had an environmental focus, but they are concerned about their community, and kind of enlisting them into your thing. And when you have an action, them all coming out, or when you're rolling out this citizen science initiative, they're engaged and they see the importance of it. We even did something with the SF Mime troupe, which has long been a progressive liberal theater troupe here in the city, and we had them. We did a kind of an EJ 101 for some local youth in the community, and then they helped them write and produce and direct a play, and I gave them kind of like the EJ 101 2-day seminar, and then they just ran with it, and it was really powerful what they came, and it was really good optics. It was good for the youth, it's good for the community. You know, the parents were coming out, everyone was getting that information. Again, we worked with the SF Tenants Association. You know, gentrification, housing is very much a kind of a related issue that I think is important to find a connection to. You know, Black Lives Matter. The community that I was working in was the last Black community in the city of San Francisco. There used to be this bustling Black communities in the San Francisco. Most people have heard of Fillmore. It was considered the West Coast. Harlem. Bayview Hunters Point was populated mainly from African Americans migrating west to help build the ships, along with the real Rosie Riveter, the Black Rosie Riveter. But no, you know, these are communities that have been sprung up, and now with the need for land for development, mega luxury upscale development, you know, these communities are being actively gentrified. And so I was really creative in terms of trying to engage with, again, the Tenants Association, local community groups, businesses when they get it, you know, the health organizations, and really having that tie of science. I think it becomes a nonpartisan issue when it's all empirical. It's not biased. It's just the truth. And so I guess the point I was making is just really keeping in a very, very open mind about who your allies could be to help you win this battle.
Well, not only an open mind, but be very careful. I learned the hard way.
Yes.
As many of you know, I cried on your shoulder.
Well, Jackie, I prefaced it with the, hey, you got to be careful who you work with and understand their politics. You know, there's few unknown, you know, entities in this world, and that they're new, that automatically should raise some questions, and figure out where they're coming from, who's funding them. But yeah, you definitely want to be very clear about how they're postured, what you can get out of them, how far they're willing to go. I've worked with the frontline EJ groups. I've worked for the fence straddlers who kind of are half EJ, half. You know, we want to keep a very balanced, moderate position so that we can continue to be invited in certain office spaces, et cetera. So, you know, you want to be nimble. For me, that's why I love coalitions. It's such a cliche or just a rote term, but you know, I like thinking of like a coalition is like everyone has their position that they could play. In Houston, I worked for like the fence straddler Air Alliance Houston, but then we had Tejas led by Juan Patas who could really execute our more radical, more direct, you know, direct work. And so I think having a coalition really avails everybody to be able to be very dynamic and very strategic in bringing it all about.
All right, and I see Nick and Vanessa, and then Liz, if you can take us out.
Oh, I just wanted to quickly self-incriminate as an academic. And I think some people on the call don't need the warning, but I think it's interesting to look at the highest visibility environmental justice issue in Flint, and look at how that's unraveled. And now we have the high-profile scientist who was leading it in a lawsuit against some of the community activists. And how did that happen? It's really a messy story. It's a long story. But I think one of the things that resonated with the community complaints there, with shortcomings of my own practice, is the idea of a water crisis being narrowed down to a lead crisis. And that's sort of what the scientist had to do. Their career was based on, what is it, water or lead monitoring. And that's what the issue became. And so, I've been doing work with formaldehyde, and I'm in this cancer cluster in South Georgia that we've been working with, and only measuring formaldehyde just is a feeble thing. So I think that's something also to consider, I guess, for communities when they reach out to scientists, knowing that their issue may be exceeding the scientific idiom, or a specific scientist's ability to may exceed a specific scientist's sort of tool set and orientation. So I think that's something that's important for communities to think about when they reach out to scientists.
Stevie, if I may, one last thing, just in response to Nick. I think, Nick, you're on to something there. I think we all agree. If I could just rotate it 180 degrees and just say, it's so important for scientists and academics to contextualize their work in the context of human life and the impacts of these communities. I think the onus is on academics to always present their work with the intersectionality of it. It's really like, hey, this is the strategy that we're doing, but we absolutely want to address the water crisis. And this is a very effective way of doing it. This is where the lever is, if you will. And so, and I think, communities understanding, having that strategy conversation, I think sometimes can quell those issues that arise when academics are so narrowly focused and not really getting the bigger picture. But I think, when they say, hey, this is where we can get it all done, this will be the one straw that breaks the camel's back. I think communities understand that. They do. And I think it's important for people to make that connection.
Liz?
Well, I wanted to see first if Vanessa wanted to add in here.
Nope, I don't have anything to add other than thank you for having me. And I hope that people in academia, in labs, are reaching out to people within their traditional territory. Hi, puppy. and actively working to involve Indigenous communities, especially youth and elders, especially those who need that like extra support, and not like bring in Indigenous people with expectations of them to understand technical language, academic language, because we're working on this together, and their inputs matters too. So that's just what I want to add.
Vanessa, I'm wondering if I could request a reply to just some thoughts I'm going to throw out really quick, and anyone has to go, I understand, but I'm just happy to get here after this long conversation, which is, when I hear Brian talking, I hear a very strategic community organizer who can build a partnership, we need a partnership, build a coalition, we need a coalition, like willing to see like what can everyone give, that can advance the cause. But I've also heard, we heard the person on the call from the Gulf South who's like, okay, we have done a lot, but at this point I need help. Like, I'm not sure what the next step is. And there's this vulnerability where I'm not sure what the next step is that doesn't somehow get honored when academics or technologists come in, I'm going to just say I'm actually not sure which one of those I am, sort of neither, but people who have a somewhat organized way of working, coming into a problem that's undefined. And that's a moment where agendas can, things can just go off the rails. And I'm just wondering if you, Vanessa, or anyone else want to talk about like that moment of vulnerability and what we could do to make partnerships form better, if anything.
I think like we've had many researchers come into Amjinong and leave, and with their credibility, and they like write books, and they kind of get their own name out there, and they leave, and we're still left with multiple releases and spills a week. We're literally losing a person in Amjinong to cancer once a month per year. So it's like 12 people a year are dying of cancer right now. It fluctuates like more sometimes, and the problem, like my personal opinion, is that the government isn't seen as a criminal in this issue. They're still seen as the people that could like help stop this issue. But for me, like I've been arrested for shutting down a pipeline because I see no solution working with the government. And I know people on this call may disagree. Many people disagree with that. My own chief and council members, my family members disagree with that, and like want to work with industry. But we're at a very critical point. I don't need to tell any of you this. And I'm willing to risk arrest and worse at this point. And I think many people are. I think there still needs to be a lot of education. I think people who are not from Indigenous communities or communities at the front lines need to some come in with like a little bit, be like humble about it, and like take on the leadership of like grassroots people, because I think it was mentioned earlier that grassroots people are different from like elected officials. They're different from people who like work directly with industry. Because you know what those people are gonna say. They're gonna say like, well, emissions are lower or regulations are better, and like, and in technical ways we need to work with that. But like, the truth is, like, when I exercise my sovereignty and my right to protect the land from these companies, these facilities, these pipelines, I'm met with police violence and police brutality. And so, like, obviously I'm still here, still happy to do what I do. But like, for people to stand behind those radical actions and to see the value in that, it is not necessarily always there. So I don't know. That was just like some words I had to say.
No, Vanessa, and I dig everything you say, and hey, people are gonna always have different opinions about direct action and the dangers that are associated, but we have to. I personally always feel like we have to continue to encourage those who feel it, on their hearts to do that, for them to have that courage, because that's what it takes. But no, I think to your kind of your prompt, Liz, I think when you do get a lot of different people, walks of life, profession, class, if you will, things can go off the track, and I think, well, one of the things that I've been fortunate in to see how this is working very well is like these really amazing environmental justice or social justice or environmental, I call them like the pantheon, like there's these leaders who can galvanize in that, like I almost think they're like stewards. It's almost like if Margaret Gordon, comes, or Juan Patas or Richard Moore, just some of the bigger names, and I don't want to just keep it to the big names, but sometimes if you can have a community be adopted, if you will, by another community that's ahead of the process, or has had some success, or has figured out what to do in these critical moments when it's what next, one of the things that I've been lucky with is just having really strong coalitions and networks to like lead us through. I mean, if it wasn't for people like Jackie and Liz, and Denny Larson and Richard Moore and Bradley Angel and like all these people who have devoted their lives to this work, and we all have different, you know, professions and pieces of this all, but collectively we've been able to make considerable change. And so I find it personally, it's been those networks where it's very warm. It's not, oh, let me tell you how to do it. Let me be in a place of authority or great knowledge and you in ignorance. You know, someone say, hey, come on in, let's talk, because I've got some experience that I really would love to share with you and see if maybe it resonates with where you are. And if not, let's brainstorm even still. I personally have found that to be one of the most effective way of getting a lot of different people. And like I was saying, the last thing I'll say is just in Bayview, you know, I had a Black Panther who was a chemistry PhD, you know, who had grown up in the community. And so you know, people aren't also very one-dimensional too. So, you know, you get those dynamic people who can speak to multiple audiences and really get it. I think that's one way I've been able to see some of those derail moments not go left.
Well, I think your point, Brian, is that, you know, a lot of times we're fighting our own fight and we feel like we're alone, okay? And it's frustrating. And that's why these connections are so important is, you know, other people have been through the same pain. Let's just say it, it's hard work and pain. So that's what helps us too to, you know, keep on going is that, you know, we're not alone. We're in this all together.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie. What a nice note to wrap on. We're at an hour and a half, so I don't want to keep everyone from a much longer day. And I think these conversations should carry on. And we can do that any number of ways, you know, up on Public Lab, off on a side. This open hour is recorded and will be posted on the Public Lab archive. If there's any resources or things in here that you want to ping back to. And the conversation space is open. Does anyone have anything else to wrap? We good?
This is Brian for the final time. Just want to thank Public Lab for hosting this conversation.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
Sharing your stories.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Carry on the fight.
Yeah, carry on. Bye-bye.